interactions with your parents and their reaction to you being the radical and on the run. And the first one I remember in here, which I didn't mark, is when you were becoming prominent at Columbia with the riots and stuff, and the New York Times interviewing your parents, which you had wished. I think you said you had wished they hadn't said anything,
right.
But they interviewed your parents, and your mom says, "My son, the revolutionary, planted these tulips."
Right.
I love that whole attitude that stays up even when things get very serious and you're on the run. And I love this section here. Later, you are on the run and you meet up with your parents clandestinely, and they offer you some money, and you take some money from them. My mother has always said what was on her mind. "I don't know if we should be giving you this money. I don't want you to have to take more risks. I just don't want you to have to take more risks like robbing a bank or dealing drugs. But if this keeps you from getting killed or caught, I'm happy."
That's a Jewish mother.
Yeah.
Would your mother have done that?
Well, yes, my father would have turned me in for my own good.
Yeah.
And then would you read these two, this part that's bracketed here?
Okay.
And I just love that.
Oh, this is so much fun. Thank you.
The part that's heavily bracketed here, from here to here.
Were both of my parents?
From here to here.
Both of my parents would then compete. No, let me start at the beginning. In my family, there have always been three things that are interchangeable: food, money, and love. Visitors to our house were never asked, "Are you hungry?" which Jake and Bertha would have thought impolite. Instead, the visitor was sat down at the table, no exceptions. Both of my parents would then compete to pull food out of the refrigerator at random: leftover roast, chicken soup, cheese and crackers, whatever there was. They were equally generous with money, never denying me or my brother or other members of the family. Our family practiced a primitive form of communism. If anyone in the extended family needed the basics, a car, a house, education, they'd get it from the most financially successful ones, Jake and Bertha.
Your parents.
Yeah, no one went without. Despite achieving financial security, my parents still lived in the same little ranch house and still drove the same Fords. We weren't even close to the league of the flashy nouveau riche Jews who we saw driving by our house in their Cadillacs on their way up the hill to South Orange. But growing up, I had wanted for nothing. When I was into ham radio at the age of 11, my father bought me the gear, telling me that the only thing he asked in return was that I do the same for my kids.
That's what I love.
Growing up in an immigrant Jewish family, in that kind of culture that I just described, is very similar to land-based, excuse the word, peasant people anywhere in the world. It's the same. There's no difference. You know, I had a Chinese girlfriend once who was from immigrant background, and it's the same. You welcome people into your house. You share what you have. There's no boundaries. You know, it's
cousins, aunties, and all that.
Anybody. It doesn't matter. You know, a stranger. You know, if somebody needs something and you have the means to help them, you help them. If you need something, you go to somebody who has the means. Right? It's not like the WASP notion of it's mine. I did this. And you go do your own, you know, because that's not how the world works. Everybody has connections, family, privileges or not, you know. I had many privileges because of the genius of who I was born, the family I was born into. Meaning, you know, it was just random. It's all accident. Who has money? Who doesn't have money? All of this is big joke.
Aunties and cousins in Hawaii, it's like that. It's like that native culture.
It's everywhere. It's only when you get enough money that you want to protect your own and your own nuclear family that it breaks down. I would say that the WASP culture, which has become dominant in the United States, is probably a tiny minority of the world.
I remember I was stopped once when I was in college and looking very hippie-like, and I went to visit some friends in Highland Park, Illinois. I was driving around looking for in my little painted-up Saab, looking for their house in this very ritzy neighborhood, and a cop stopped me, and it turned out to just stop me because I looked out of place. And he was being apologetic afterwards. And he says, well, the more money people get, the more paranoid they get.
Yeah.
And I thought,
Yeah, of course. Conversely, I was gathering firewood in the Zuni Mountains once, and I was busted by a sheriff from Laguna Pueblo. I won't mention his name. And he says, do you have a permit? And I said, gee, I don't really have a permit. And he says, well, why don't you just go get the permit, and then I won't worry about it. And I'm going to stay down here for a while, so for about 10 minutes. Why don't you just drive up there and go get the permit? And if you want to dump the wood off, you can. If not, not.
well, I like that about New Mexico. I'll tell a story about a friend of mine who lives near the a pueblo I won't name, called San Juan Pueblo. He was driving through one day on his way home from work, and a cop stops him for something or for nothing. He says, let me see your license. And my friend says, it's in the trunk. And the cop says, okay, never mind.
I was speeding one morning to the airport. We live near the airport in Albuquerque, and a cop stops me. He was also, it was also Laguna, or I think it might have been Acoma Pueblo. I recognize the name, and he was airport cop, and he says, Stevie was with me, and he says, you were speeding, and I said, yeah, I'm sorry. I was just testing the car out. I wanted to see how fast it would go. And he said, okay, let me make a check. So he goes, does a check, right? And he comes back. Okay, I can either give you a ticket or I can give you a warning. Which would you rather have?
Let me think a minute.
And I said, I'll take the warning. And he goes, good choice. An aspect to life, it's not bureaucratic. My TVI used to be like that a lot until the white people took over.
You're talking about years later, you came across your FBI report that quoted your psychiatrist's letter when you saw a psychiatrist briefly when you were a student.
No, he helped me get out of the draft.
Yeah. You said, I ran across an FBI report that quoted the psychiatrist's letter under the heading, Rudd's Problems. Chronic depression and a sense of isolation with intermittent suicidal ideation and impulses, high levels of anxiety in relationship to work, dating, sexuality, career, and the future generally, and difficulty in acceptance of the established authority of institutions. End quote. At first I thought the shrink had laid it on a little thick, but then I realized this description sounded like everybody I knew.
That's the truth.
It's like I was recently saying to somebody, God, can I think of anybody who's not taking antidepressants?
Well, it's funny to, it's funny to see the FBI stuff. There's a lot of FBI stuff in the book, actually.
Now that the external constraints were off, we needed to get away from each other and start new lives. We craved relationships with other people. I just thought that was such an interesting observation that that constraint, that pressure kept you together when it was off. You went in your own direction.
That's very typical.